Story 1. This story takes place in the deep pine forests of Oregon. Before we dive into tonight's terrifying tale, make sure to subscribe to the channel and give this video a thumbs up. It really helps us bring you more spine-chilling stories. Drop a comment below telling us where in the world you're watching from and what time it is on your end. Let's see who's brave enough to watch this at 2 a.m. Now, let's begin. A young man had decided to spend a weekend camping alone. He was experienced, confident, and had done solo trips before. Nothing about this one seemed unusual, until the second night. He had set up his tent near a creek, cooked a small meal, and went to sleep early. But around midnight he was startled awake by the sound of footsteps, slow, heavy, circling his tent. At first he thought it could have been a deer or some other animal, but then he heard something else, whispering. A faint voice that didn't sound like it came from outside, but from inside the tent with him. He froze, listening, heart racing, but eventually the sounds stopped. He stayed awake the rest of the night, waiting for daylight. When morning came, he unzipped the tent to look around. What he found made his blood run cold. On the inside wall of his tent were muddy handprints pressed into the fabric. They hadn't been there before he fell asleep. Shaken, he decided to leave as soon as possible. He grabbed his bottle and walked to the creek for water before packing up. But he never came back. Hours later, hikers found his campsite. His backpack was still inside the tent. His fire was still warm. But at the edge of the creek, they found only one of his boots and more muddy handprints. The ranger who investigated said the strangest thing of all. There were 3 sets of footprints leading away from the campsite, but none of them ever came back, and to this day the young man was never found. If you were camping alone and woke up to muddy handprints inside your tent, what would you do? Run or stay until morning? Let me know in the comments, and remember, if you enjoyed tonight's story, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss another chilling tale. Sleep well, if you can. Story 2. Our next story comes from Europe, in a remote mountain village that locals say is cursed. A group of friends were traveling through Romania, exploring the Carpathian Mountains. They decided to spend a night in a small village they had read about online, one that supposedly had an abandoned house on the edge of the forest. The villagers warned them not to go near it. They said people who stayed there never slept peacefully again. But of course, the group didn't listen. That night they broke into the old wooden house. It was empty, dusty floors, broken windows, and a single room where they laid out their sleeping bags. They joked, laughed, and filmed themselves, trying to prove they weren't afraid. But around 3 a.m. things changed. One of them woke up to the sound of footsteps upstairs. He froze, because this house didn't even have an upper floor. Then, they all heard it. Heavy, dragging footsteps above their heads. Dust fell from the ceiling, as if something was walking just above them. Terrified, they grabbed their flashlights, but the moment the light hit the walls, they all noticed the same thing. Dozens of muddy handprints smeared across the inside of the room. Fresh, wet, and dripping. One friend swore he saw a shadow move across the corner of the room. Tall, bent, almost human, but not quite. By sunrise, they ran out of the house, leaving their gear behind. When they finally made it back to the village, the locals refused to even speak to them. They only shook their heads, muttered prayers, and told them to leave immediately. To this day, none of the friends will talk about what happened in that house, but the video they recorded, the audio picked up footsteps and whispering voices, hours after they had already run out. Would you ever spend a night in an abandoned house, knowing the locals told you not to? Comment your answer below if you're brave enough, and remember, the scariest stories are the ones that sound just a little too real. Story 3. Highway Horror Story, The Midnight Passenger. It was past midnight on Interstate 80 in Nebraska. A man named Daniel was driving home from a business trip, alone, with nothing but endless highway ahead. He had been driving for hours without seeing another car. The road was empty, the radio barely catching static, and the night was unnervingly quiet. That's when he noticed something strange. Up ahead, on the shoulder of the highway, stood a man. Perfectly still, facing the road. His clothes looked torn, almost old-fashioned, and he wasn't holding out his thumb like a hitchhiker would. He was just standing. Daniel's instincts screamed at him not to stop, so he drove past without slowing down. But as he glanced in his side mirror, his blood ran cold. The man was gone. Daniel tried to brush it off, blaming exhaustion, until about 20 minutes later, he saw him again. The same figure standing on the shoulder, same torn clothes, same stillness. Only this time, as Daniel passed, the man turned his head. Slowly. His eyes were completely white, reflecting in the headlights like an animal. Terrified, Daniel pressed the gas and sped down the highway. His hands were shaking, his heart racing, but the nightmare wasn't over, because when he looked into his rearview mirror, he saw the man again, not on the road, but sitting in the back seat of his car. Daniel swerved to the side of the highway, slammed the brakes and spun around, only to find the back seat empty. Nothing there but shadows. He didn't stop again until sunrise, when he finally pulled into a gas station. The attendant took one look at him, pale and trembling, and said, "Let me guess, you saw him, the passenger. You're lucky you made it here. Not everyone does." If you were driving alone at night and saw someone on the side of the highway, would you stop or would you keep driving? Comment below. Story 4. The car that wouldn't leave. In 2019, I was driving cross-country and stopped at a small gas station in Arizona around 2 a.m. The desert was pitch black, the road empty, and the station looked like something out of a horror movie. Flickering lights, peeling paint, and one pump that barely worked. When I pulled in, I noticed another car already there, an old black sedan parked by the far pump. Its engine was running, headlights on, but no one was inside. At first, I thought maybe the driver had gone in to pay, but the store was dark and locked, a handwritten sign taped to the door. Back in 10 minutes. Weird, but whatever. I started pumping gas, trying not to think about how isolated the place felt. That's when I heard it. A laugh, high-pitched, childlike. I froze, looked around. The lot was empty. The desert stretched forever in every direction. Then I looked at the black sedan. In the back seat, barely visible in the glow of its headlights, was a little girl. Her skin was pale, almost bluish, and her eyes, they were completely white. She smiled at me. I dropped the nozzle, spilling gas on my shoes, and scrambled back to my car. I locked the doors and tried to convince myself I was imagining things, but when I glanced back at the sedan, the back seat was empty. The laughter, however, hadn't stopped. It was closer. I turned the key, desperate to get out of there. My headlights illuminated the pumps, the sedan, and the little girl, standing outside my window, inches from the glass. Her mouth stretched impossibly wide as she whispered something I couldn't hear. I floored it. Tires screeched as I shot out of the lot and back onto the highway. My heart was pounding, hands shaking on the wheel. For a few miles I kept glancing in the mirrors, making sure nothing was behind me. But when I looked to the passenger seat, she was there, the same pale girl, sitting calmly, buckled in, smiling at me. I swerved, nearly losing control of the car. When I looked again, the seat was empty. By the time I reached the next town, I was a wreck. I stopped at another gas station, practically stumbling inside. The attendant took one look at me and said, "Let me guess. You saw her. The girl by the pumps. Don't worry. She usually picks someone new every few weeks." I couldn't even respond. I just turned and left. To this day, I refuse to stop at small gas stations at night, because I know sooner or later she'll be waiting for me again. If you had to work alone on a graveyard shift, or stopped at a gas station at 2 a.m. and saw something in the backseat of a car, what would you do? Comment below with your answer, if you're brave enough. And if you enjoyed tonight's stories, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss another terrifying tale. Sleep well, 'cause if you can.